And then I just want to say thanks so much everyone for joining us today, and so sorry about the, the trouble getting started. But yeah, it should all be smooth sailings, and we invite you to follow us on all our social media platforms in the future so you can stay up to date for our next one. Unico, I'm going to hand over to you. Are you ready?
So, the only thing now, I mean, I shared my screen, but I cannot see my notes there in another document. so I might have to do this by head. Starting up front, I'm just an ordinary Dutch person living in Brussels for the past 15 years, at least being active in Brussels for a very long time for the Dutch Waste Management Association. I'm also the special advisor to the Global Recycling Foundation, and was recently in February, March on a trip to Africa to talk with the United Nations and the African Union about cooperation on waste management. I'm coming from a Protestant family. 3 of my grandparents, so 1 lady, 2 men, were priests. And I like democracy very much, based on fact-finding and truth. What I wanted to say, and I cannot see my notes, is that a very famous climate scientist said that richer countries are more resilient. So what I would say then is, let's make countries richer. That's very important, and not poorer. And furthermore, what is very important also in policy making, that governments do not focus alone on one single issue and let all the other issues fall down on the floor, but have a comprehensive view on all the challenges and then make the best out of it. And that's something what I do believe personally is going a little bit wrong with the handling of this COVID-19 crisis. So I'm just going to my notes because I think it's important that I tell you what I think that the EU trade agreement will help to make people across Africa richer. And also there, a very important element is, of course, waste management. Because if you do proper waste collection and waste treatment, you will prevent a lot of environmental pollution. You will help the CO2 levels to go down. And you will also help to use waste as a substitute for primary resources. So in the nexus of energy, water, and resources, yeah, the balance will be much more in the direction of sustainability. And I think that nations should not be forced to choose between growth and lifting people out of poverty and doing something for the climate or fighting a new coronavirus. They must go hand in hand. So I personally believe very much in the concept of people, planet, and profit as a departure point for sustainable growth. If you look at the reality, also the reality now, it seems very hard, even undoable, for governments to detect and prevent all possible disasters and catastrophes, like volcano outbursts, earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, famines, wildfires, and even epidemic diseases. I believe that while nations do their best to detect and avoid such disasters, they generally do not take radical actions for the simple reasons that doing so would make societies poorer and less capable of confronting all major challenges, including those super volcanoes and disease epidemics. So what could be interesting for Africa as a whole, and maybe South Africa specifically, is to look at the formation of capital long term, also related to regulatory certainty and a decent legal framework with the right checks and balances in government, also like inspection and control, and also support of the private sector to invest based on this framework. I will show you a couple of examples from the Netherlands. So one of the things is this. Can you see the PowerPoint? Is it visible for everybody?
Yes, Unico.
Yeah. Okay. So in 1953, the Netherlands, but also the UK, was confronted with a natural sea disaster, the North Sea flooding. Killed over 1,000 people in the Netherlands, and also a lot of people in the UK. And from that moment onwards, the Dutch government and Dutch society decided to develop a master plan, the Delta Works, a master plan to keep the Netherlands safe. And it's a long-term plan. It's a long-term plan with a lot of engineering, with long-term forecasting and budgeting of taxpayers' money as well. And the effect of that was that because we adapted to the climate, you have to understand that the Netherlands is for, I think, 2/3 under the seawater level. We adapted to that situation. We could create stability to grow, to do more economic activities, etc. And so this was based on a disaster which happened. And we adapted to that situation, and we started to do planning. And I think that's a very good example how governments can act. I'm not so much in favor of climate alarmism, because there I miss the component of really decent planning and executing of goals. And planning means also, that you have to invest, that you have to have this framework of legal certainty, that you have to people on board. They have to also find jobs in this endeavor, in this combating this challenge, etc. So climate alarmism is in that sense not really positive. I do like climate activism and also environmentalists who are in communities active to engage with the people and to build towards a new situation by showing, if we do this, then the result is this. Now, another example, due to these Delta Works, the Netherlands was growing also economically as a country, and we have a very dense population. So we have not so much room, to say the least. And the waste problem was building in the 80s and the 90s, partially because of the population growth, of course, and more economic activity, but also because of the change in the composition of waste. I'll show it to you. So here you can see that the composition of the 1940s in waste was different from the composition from the 80s onwards. So the Dutch government made the analysis that things have had to change, and that is a very positive thing that they made this analysis. Because for further growth you need also stability on the ground and a clean environment. And the waste management sector in the Netherlands enables all other actors in the economy to function properly. So there was a master plan was being developed and executed on a national level, combined with a bottom-up approach. So all the regions were also involved. And what you can see here is that the borders changed from local to more national to even European. And you can imagine that if you produce more recyclables, the recyclables are connected to the commodities market, and Peter will tell much more about that. And for that, you need open borders. You need a lot of more things, but Peter will also go into that detail. So I do believe that for South Africa, this could also be very interesting pathway. So if you combine the idea that capital formation has to build on long-term contracts in society, on a local level, on an individual level, and also on the national level is important for economic growth on the basis of more sustainability, then you can attach to that a lot of very important programs. And thereby you also invite the private sector to be partner in that. Now, what was the result? Also a firm decrease of CO2. Yeah, so very positive result, and we are now trying to do even better. Okay, if we go to the reality on the ground in the world, this is from the World Bank report, Waste 2.0. What we do in the world is we dump 660 million tons of municipal solid waste per year directly into the environment. That is 5 fully filled Wembley stadiums full of waste, which is without any environmental control, goes into the rivers, the seas, to land, etc., and is spreading. And another 740 million tons of municipal solid waste is landfilled in different qualities, I would say. So, and this produces a lot of CO2, but also is a waste of resources, of water and energy. Now, go to the third project. Of course, climate change. So the climate change in this context means that humankind attributes to CO2 production, and that this can have bad consequences because of the feedback loops. I mean, this theory is widely known, and to combat that, you can invest, for instance, in renewable energy. And one of the very new projects is to build interconnectors in the North Sea between countries, in this case Norway, Denmark, the UK and the Netherlands, whereby a lot of wind energy is produced, which can also be transformed into hydrogen and be transferred to the mainland. And when I look at the sheer possibilities in South Africa, then I would say to the Dutch government, Dutch government, you have a target of about 19 million CO2 reduction equivalents to be achieved in the Netherlands. But maybe it's a better idea to say we're going to team up with South Africa, and we're going to invest into big offshore wind projects there as well. And by doing that, achieve 30% of our target internationally. And then you make a deal with the South African government that, for instance, 50% of the energy production goes back to the Netherlands, and 50% goes back to South Africa. So these can be models for the future. The Netherlands is too small to produce all its energy by itself. It's impossible. Germany is also way too small to put so many windmills and solar panels on its own territory to be completely energy independent. That's impossible. And I think that's also a good thing that it is impossible, because if we do business with each other, we are also more peaceful towards each other. That is also what humankind shows us. So if we want to preserve the peace, it's the best thing to do that is to do business with each other, and business which, in the sense of business which is a win-win for also ordinary people. Yeah, that's basically it. So short and sweet.
Thank you, Unico. And thank you for making a plan. I understand there were some unexpected things that popped up for you today. I'm going to hand back over to Peter, but I understand you have to leave us now. So if there are any emails, I'm sure we can, if there are any questions, sorry, I'm sure we can send you an email. If that's all right.
Okay. Yeah. If there are a couple of questions, I can answer them now as well. So it's what you want. I'm also very interested to hear about. I see a lot of names here, but would be interesting also to have like 3 questions where I can react. It's also fine for me.
I did see a question pop up though. If Unico is still here, but yeah, just in the meantime, feel free to send through questions. The one that's come through says, when you say rich, do you mean rich in material things?
Well, I mean, with rich, I mean, of course, I mean, the economy is based on you all. So to make a country richer is to make sure that that a lot of people can participate, have more certainty in life and stability, and can participate in this capital formation. And then you will see that the country as a whole is becoming more richer and more resilient. So I mean, if you have to fight to get food on the table for every next week, then that's a very different situation than if you have more certainty in life, that you don't have to fight for this every week, but that you have certainty that okay, if I'm getting unemployed, etc., there's a social network where I can jump into and then can jump out again. All these kind of things can help, of course, to make a country as a whole more resilient. And proper investment attracts private investors, not only from inside South Africa, but also from outside. So this is a very important element as well, and it will be an accelerator for more jobs.
Thank you, Unico. There was another question saying, how does one invest and avoid corruption taking a lot in the investment?
Yeah, corruption is really a big disease. But yeah, I think that by doing the proper, maybe by doing like international cooperation on these big projects, whereby also not only taxpayers' money from South Africa, but also from the Netherlands is involved, and maybe also from Austria, and private money. You can control that better. But I understand that this is a challenge to overcome, and it should not be ignored. But I think by the right planning, I mean, also in the Netherlands, we have developed in a certain way to a situation of less corruption. But yeah, this is something which has to be monitored very clearly.
Thanks, Unico. And there's another question that says, how do you envisage this offset idea might realize? Which practical offsets might be achieved that will alleviate South Africa's priorities?
Well, look, if I would be the president of the European Union, I would establish together with the African Union an investment fund for Africa, which includes also important goals for the European Union. And this same element can be done on a nation's level. So I believe that the context between the South African government and several European countries are quite good. And I think that also South Africa is being perceived as a quite stable country to do investments if you look at the wider scope of African countries. So combine that with the priority to do something more concrete on CO2 reduction, So in other words, energy, renewable energy. I think that there is a window of opportunity to really talk on a high level with the different governments, how we can get this idea of doing combined investments to make that happen. And one of the first things which has to be done, of course, is to connect South African experts to the North Sea project, because I think that is one of the first projects now around where you have these interconnectors, on offshore interconnectors, the planning, etc. So, and that can all be organized. But okay, I mean, I'm talking as if I were the president. That's not the case. But that's the way I would go about it. So if there are people from the South African government here, then I would say just start calling the Foreign Office in the Netherlands, and maybe start with a tour in the port of Rotterdam, and then we can start.
Thanks, Unico. There's a question from Tony that says, you spoke earlier about COVID fatigue. Now that South Africa is doing well and moving to level 1, how would your experience in the EU be used to maintain COVID vigilance?
Yes. I mean, the situation in Europe is very confusing at the moment. Let me say it like this. We see on the one hand side that the amount of people dying with COVID has decreased. It's in the Netherlands on about 2 per day at the moment, and still we had a lot of fuss the last summer months in the Netherlands about potential contaminations, people being infected. So I think that it's very important for the governments to get the data right, and that seems to be a little bit of a problem. And indeed, more and more people are getting worried about the following, and that is not a potential second lockdown, but it is a third consequence is a financial reset. That means that the banks are going to collapse because of what you don't see is the capital destruction behind the curtain. And that's also my main concern, actually, is that you can focus on one thing, but you can lose focus then on all the other things which are important. And I can give you a couple of examples from the Netherlands where things went wrong. Yeah, for instance, cancer treatments have been postponed. And the production of radioactive material for cancer treatment has also been postponed. We see people, children, youngsters having mental problems because of all the behavioral measures. And we see also a government at the moment who is still not taking aerosols very serious as a transmission route. And that can come with the consequence that in the nursing homes where the most weak persons, elderly, my Dutch fellow men and women are living, can be exposed again with high doses of viral content. So I don't think that all the Dutch people are as worried as I am, but I have a very international view because of my job as well. I have very deep contacts with the European Business Society, also with bankers, and I'm extremely concerned about the consequences of current corona policies. So I'm not so much concerned about Africa, because there's a difference between where Africa stands at the moment and the West is standing at the moment. But if you look at Europe and Japan, and also America, we are heading for a very, very serious financial storm. I'm very worried about it.
Thank you, Unico. Peter, would you like to start your presentation? We can see your slides, and they're sharing in full screen. So whenever you're ready, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Tara. So good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you. It's a big honor and a great pleasure for me to join this webinar. Thanks to all the organizers for having me here. Yes, as Unico already did introduction on himself, I'm also a normal Austrian person based in the waste management sector since more than 25 years. Currently, I have several functions in Brussels at two associations, at Zurich, which is the Recycling Industry Association, and another one which is the Waste Management and Environmental Service Association. I'm also working as a member of an expert group to the European Commission, and I'm also in charge of a recycling company. That is a very brief overview about my background. So let me start with a global overview about plastic pollution. And if we aim to address the ocean plastic problem, and an understanding of the global picture is important. It highlights that fundamental role of waste management. It highlights that the fundamental role of waste management, of appropriate waste management, is to prevent oceans of pollution. And if you look on top left, you have only 4 slides here, or 4 pictures showing the situation on the riverbanks in Mumbai, and top right you can see the Caribbean pollution in the Caribbean Sea. Bottom left you can see a river in Manila in Philippines, and bottom right you can see the Yangtze River in China. This is just a very, very brief shot on what is currently going on in terms of ocean pollution and river pollution, of course. Here's another example of pollution, terrestrial pollution. There are the newest figures from Mount Everest, which I call is the highest dump of the world. They have cleaned only 35 tons of littered waste in 2020, and this costs of more than 7 million euro. That means 1 ton has to be disposed by a cost of 200,000 euros per ton, or 236,000 US dollars. This is amazing money, amazing amount of money just to get rid of a few tons of waste, which contained mainly of oxygen bottles, tents, but also plastic packaging, which the visitors of the mountain visitors brought up the mountain. If we look onto the global river plastic input into the ocean, then you can see that the leading region of the worst contamination, or the worst environmental impact on seas or on ocean is Asia, with more than 86% of plastic input by rivers. And then there's a big gap between the following regions: Africa, South America, and Europe is even below 1%. And globally, 80% of the total ocean plastic pollution comes from land-based sources, and only 20% are based on marine sources. If we look on the mismanagement of plastic waste by region, it gives the same picture: East Asia, Pacific region, and South Asia. So in total, Southeast Asia together, they are responsible for nearly 70% of the quantity of mismanaged waste, mismanaged plastic waste, which I defined as waste which is disposed in dumps, not in landfills, or in open, uncontrolled landfills, littered anywhere. And this amount of mismanaged plastic waste is only plastic waste, not total waste generation. It's nearly 32 million tons annually, and 1/3 of this quantity is polluted into the oceans, where we have now input flows of 11 million tons per year of plastic waste into the oceans. So let's stick to the plastic production, plastic industry. As you can see here, plastic production started mainly in 1950s, and the last 65 years until today, the amount of produced plastics increased nearly 200-fold. So there's a tremendous growth in the plastic industry. But of what is now produced on plastics, on primary plastics, it's in total 360 million tons per year. And out of that, only 9% are recycled globally. So there's a tremendous loss of value because of plastic. Different types of plastics in products are not collected and furthermore are not recycled. And to give you a short overview about the difference between plastic production markets and plastic recycling markets, and you can see the production of 360 million metric tons of plastics, primary plastics, leads to a market size value of roughly $480 billion US. And compared to that, what is the market size of recycled plastics is less than 10%. It's only 40 billion US dollar. So it's only 65% of the primary production. But the growth rate of the recycling market is much bigger. It's currently 8.5. The forecasts are currently at 8.5% in compared to 3.2% on the production side of the primary plastics market. The main plastic industry is located also in Asia. More than 50% of the 360 million metric tons which are annually produced are produced in Asia. That's also the reason, or one of the reasons, why the pollution with plastic waste and other residues from the production facility is the most in that region of Southeast Asia. And if we look into the use of the primary plastics by sectors, and you can see here on this chart that the primary use sector is packaging. So almost 1/3, a little bit high, more than 1/3 of the primary plastic is used for packaging use. And then there's a big gap between the packaging sector and all other sectors for different uses of plastics like building, textiles, electronics, etc. So the major industry using primary plastic is the packaging industry. But nevertheless, we have to rethink the future of plastics, because all the plastic products are more or less used only one time, and then roughly 95% of the plastic packaging is lost, especially the value of the plastic packaging material. And this counts for approximately 80 to 120 billion US dollar annually. So it's a high loss of economic value. And also you can see here in the second bullet point that the plastic, about 1/3 of the plastic packaging escapes from a collection system. That means it's neither collected, it's mostly littered, and so it's also this causes also additional costs for after-use externalities, and this is another US dollar 40 billion annually on costs, which we have to calculate for plastic packaging. If we look on the global megatrends in the plastic industry, we are facing four major inputs. The feedstock, that means the input streams into the plastic production facilities, will change, and there's also a big demand from the market in terms of more sustainable production, more sustainable use of plastic products. Also, the consumers have changed their behavior and are calling for better sustainability of products made of plastic, and digital transformation will also play quite a big role. But important is to say that if it comes to create more sustainable plastics and chemicals, this will drive the use of new materials and new sources, especially bio-based or recycled resources. This is a big chance for the recycling industry. And also this will drive new technologies for recycling, which I will come up later, but one is chemical recycling and fermentation. What is the current status of plastic recycling? We are facing the real situation that roughly 2 billion people in the world do not have access to a waste collection service yet today. This is really awful number, and the forecasts say that this could grow up to 4 billion people by 2040. That means people with no access to a waste collection system may double. And that means we have to invest into infrastructure consisting out of bins, containers, collection systems, and of course of first mechanical recycling facilities. And I have implemented here a figure. We need to double the mechanical recycling capacity to get rid all of the plastics by 2040 up to 86 million metric tons per year. And if you calculate this down, that means we need roughly 100 recycling plants of each 20,000 metric tons per year capacity, built every year 107 recycling plants from 2021 onwards. So this is a huge number of capacities for mechanical recycling. That means mostly sorting facilities, and this gives you a slight overview about the huge investments which are necessary to bring 2 billion people, or in 2040 4 billion people, or connect this number of people to appropriate infrastructure, means bins, collection system, and sorting systems. What are the trends in plastics recycling? We are facing, at least in Europe, that capacities are increasing. I mean, the capacity at each single plant. So we have now new sorting facilities in Germany and France, which exceeds 100,000 tons a year on sorting capacity. And there's also a new trend to new sorting technologies, automated sorting, and imposed by the digitalization to new technologies based on robotics and artificial intelligence. And what is now coming up, and this is the very brand new technology, it's chemical recycling. It should be addressed to not or very complicated to mechanical recycle plastic streams like thermosets or multi-layer packaging films, etc. So this is a new technology which might be implemented in 5 to 10 years if we can follow the development, especially in the chemical industry. Then chemical recycling shall complement the mechanical recycling, and it's foreseen to handle or to manage mostly heterogeneous plastic mixtures which cannot be easily mechanical sorted and recycled, and those plastics from chemical recycling can be used for virgin quality polymers production as a raw material. But we have a tough discussion, and Unico will confirm that in Europe, at the European Union, because it's a very controversial discussion about what is the legal qualification of chemical recycling. Is it material recycling, or is it energy recovery? So the chemical industry is putting much pressure on the European Commission to classify chemical recycling as a new technology in the waste hierarchy as high as possible. And this is the background for this controversial discussion. What are the impacts of COVID-19 on the plastic recycling value chain? We have seen a tremendous drop in demand for recycled plastics. This is caused by the drop of the crude oil crude oil price, which is now roughly about $40 per barrel, and which was at the same time last year almost double, up to $70 per barrel. So there is a very cheap primary plastic material on the market. There's no demand for secondary raw materials because collection, sorting, pre-treatment and further recycling technologies are very expensive to achieve industrial standards, which are asked by the producers. And the recycling industry has to follow these industrial standards, has to achieve them. And that's the reason why currently all the plastic recyclers are suffering from these very low prices for primary resins in Europe and also in other regions in the world. What have increased as a volume stream is municipal waste, and especially the plastic packaging waste coming from food delivery services and e-commerce platforms like Amazon, etc. And industrial and commercial waste has also dropped by nearly 50%. The only positive development, you can see it here in the last bullet point, is the food grade recycled PET material, and this is caused by the single-use plastic directive, which has a demand of which implemented the demand for for recycled content of 25% by 2050. So this is the slide where you can see the single-use plastic directive. There is a mandatory recycled content. There has to be mandatory recycled content in PET bottles for beverages in 2025 of 25%, and this will increase to 30% in 2030. It's a mandatory recycled content, and this is why the prices for our PET have increased, because all the producers have started collecting our PET to fulfill these legal requirements of the European Union. And the final slide is that's also that's the reason why PET bottle consumption is increasing. I have done a comparison between the European Union and the United States market. So we use 140 pieces of bottles, plastic bottles, PET bottles per person per year, and United States is double as high as the European Union. But nevertheless, not all the PET can be collected and can be recycled, and that's why the chemical industry is promoting that the new technology of chemical recycling may help to support the non-mechanical recycling waste or plastic streams. And yeah, aluminum cans are not really big hype. So for us, the PET bottles and all other drinking containers made of different plastics will resume and will be the most used plastic packaging in Europe. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. I see we have had a few more questions coming through. So there was a question that said 107 recycling plants, is that for Europe only?
This is a number for global recycling plants, global mechanical sorting and recycling plants. It's a global number, not Europe.
Okay, wow, that's quite a bit lower than I would expect. So quite interesting. Then there's a question from
I can see a question from Mr. or Mrs. Pretorius. Chemical recycling needs huge volumes. Yes, that's one of the cornerstones of implementing this technology. As far as I am informed, the chemical recycling would need huge input streams of plastic waste, and we are talking about sorting facilities where I mentioned 100,000 tons, and if we talking about chemical recycling facility, we're talking about 10 times higher input stream volumes. That means 1 million tons, and this is very critical for a dense populated area like Europe. You know, or to collect 1 million tons of plastic, which is lightweighted material, you transport mostly air and not weight on a truck to when you do the collection, door-to-door collection. And this is really, I would say, the biggest hurdle for implementing the new chemical recycling technology. It's the huge volumes which are needed for the chemical facilities.
Thank you, Peter. I believe I was cut off again. There's another question that says, what are the costs of chemical versus mechanical recycling?
Currently, we have costs for mechanical sorting and recycling between 150 to 200 euro per ton input stream. But there are no reliable figures existing about chemical recycling, because all the technology are mostly existing in a small lab scale. So they had to need to scale up the technologies to, let's say, industrial scale. And then we will see. I have some figures in mind from Germany, but we're talking about at least 3 times higher costs for chemical recycling compared to mechanical recycling or mechanical sorting.
Wow, all right. And in terms of the life cycle assessment for the same comparison between chemical and mechanical recycling?
No, it does not exist yet for chemical recycling, because no single plant exists on the globe for chemical recycling. And there are also 4 different main technologies currently under discussion. So they do some life cycle analysis, but you know, it's not comparable to a full-sized plant and full equipped industrial plant. So if you do it on a lab scale, it's a Mickey Mouse.
All right, and then there's another question from Madeline that says, is the COVID-19 impact information global, or is it in the EU?
This is our EU experiences, but I have the same information from United States or North America. That means Canada and US. So the impacts on the plastic markets are the same. That means the prices dropped due to the low crude oil prices, and quantities increased from households because people stood at home and tried to get rid of some old furnitures and books and whatever, cleaned up their apartments or houses. And the industry was stopped or locked down. And so no industrial production was happening for a couple of weeks. That's why no industrial or commercial waste was also generated.
Thanks. And then there's a question that says, does Europe have either A, a ban on certain plastics, such as single-use plastics like straws, and B, a deposit system for incentivizing and placing a value on returns of empty containers? And are there any recommendations?
Yes, there is a ban on specific single-use plastic products like straws. It's implemented already in the Single-Use Plastic Directive. It's already law in Europe. It's European law, and it has to be implemented in all the member states. The deposit system works very well in some countries of Europe which have already implemented it. There is a deposit on plastic drinking containers in Germany, independently from the size. It's 25 euro cent, that means 0.5 euros per piece, and that led to a recycling rate of 95 to 97% of PET bottles brought back to the supermarkets and retailers. That's amazing. And in Austria, we have currently the discussion where the trade and commerce businesses are against the implementation or introduction of a deposit scheme, but waste management and recycling companies are in favor of that. And now we have a heavy discussion and, let's say, a fight between the trade and retail people or sector and the waste management and recycling sector in terms of implementing or not implementing a deposit scheme.
Thank you, Peter. Those are quite encouraging stats. Do you know if it works out to be economically viable if people, if there is a sort of deposit like fee that's charged for people returning items, as you mentioned in Germany?
If it's economically viable?
Yes, because I know that's often an issue here in South Africa in terms of kind of the collection and all the costs that are incurred on the way to actually recycling the item.
Yeah, it is viable because it's a win-win situation for both sides. On one hand, you get all the high quality PET material back into the recycling process. We do a lot of bottle to bottle recycling, even in Austria, and these are very expensive facilities. You have to achieve the food grade material industrial standards, which is, let's say, the highest standards in the plastic recycling sectors, which have to be achieved. And this is very costly. And if you have more material coming, let's say, separately collected at the supermarket, at the vending machines, so it's not contaminated with other materials, you don't have to pre-sort them, or of course you have to clean them, but nevertheless you save one step of mechanical pre-treatment. And on the other hand, the remaining 5% for which the consumers have paid at the supermarket, and the 5% which are not brought back to the vending machines in the retail shops, they cause a so-called difference of 1 billion euros for the trade and retail sector. So they have, just for not refunding 25 euro cents per piece of bottle, they earn net income of 1 billion euro per year. So this is a win-win situation, both for the traders and the retailers, as well as for the recycling industry, which gets cleaner, better sorted, and not so contaminated material.
Thank you, Peter. There's a comment from Henk that says, you did not mention the circular economy concept. Do you have any thoughts on that?
A circular economy concept is already implemented in European waste legislation. We have 6 guidelines, 6 directives already included in the so-called circular economy package, which was set in force on 3rd of July 2020 in entire Europe. And now we have the Green Deal from Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, which is connected to the so-called Circular Economy Action Plan, which also put more emphasis on increasing consumer behavior, increasing digitalization, increasing awareness raising of in terms of waste management and environmental pollution. So it's a strategic instrument, but it is very detailed, and I think this is a very good concept, and very recommendable concept to copy it for other regions in the world.
Thanks, Peter. There's a question that says, why can't we focus on switching to a more natural material to replace plastic, such as hemp or cane? Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion ongoing between, biological degradable plastics, etc. But so as far as we got information from the market, it's very difficult to recycle, and if you mix biodegradable plastic material with, let's say, normal plastic material, it causes additional contamination of the mechanical recycled plastic, because people do not separate it. There's also no separate collection of biodegradable plastic packagings or similar materials offered. So people bring their biodegradable plastics in and bring it to the plastic collection containers for so-called normal plastics, and then it's mixed up, and then it's very difficult to separate it afterwards. So it's not really supporting the plastic recycling issue.
Thank you, Peter. There's a question that says, the drop in demand for recycled plastic was a severe blow for our collectors. Our buyback centers are finding a loss of about 70% of income. Is there any move to support recycling in the form of subsidies from governments in general across the world?
Yeah, there's a new decision. There was a new decision made during the discussions on 21st of July at the European Council, when they have debated and agreed to the budget, to the 7-year budget of the European Union, the entire European Union. The budget exceeds 1 trillion of euros for this. This is the normal budget, and then they have agreed on a separate budget it's called Recovery Fund, that should help member states to recover from COVID crisis, and it's another 750 billion euros. And those 750 billions recovery fund should be paid back by the member states. And the first step is they introduced a tax on non-recycled plastics, which will come into force by January 1st, 2021. That's in a couple of months from now. And this plastic tax should be placed on non-recyclable plastic packaging or non-recycled. So it covers both. Non-recyclable means due to the material composition, let's say multi-layer packaging, plastic packaging, which consists of 6, 7, 8 different plastic layers. It's non-recyclable. And on not recycled plastic packaging, that means which are disposed of with the normal residual waste from households into the municipal waste stream. And this plastic tax will be introduced with 800 euro per ton. This is amazing high amount, and it's related to let's say pay back one part of this recovery fund of 750 billion euros. So it's amazing high tax on non-recyclable and not recycled plastic packaging coming up by January 1st, 2021. This is a very strong, tough instrument from the European Commission for non-recyclable and not recycled plastic packaging.
Thank you, Peter. There's a question that says the RPP used in Magnum is not obtained by traditional mechanical recycling, as there's not sustainable for food contact packaging. We use an innovative recycling process that transforms the plastic waste into a resin with the same characteristics as virgin food grade resin. Is this different from chemical recycling?
Yeah, this is a question of how do you define chemical recycling? We have mainly two classification systems. We are talking about plastic to plastic, P2P, and we're talking about plastic to fuel, which means you produce some alternative fuel out of plastic waste. This is highly followed by the US, by United States. They are talking about so-called advanced recycling or monomer recycling, but within Europe, plastic to fuel will never have a chance to get classified as material recycling. So it will be classified as energy recycling or for energy purpose, and this is, let's say, in terms of the waste hierarchy, it's one level below material recycling, and only plastic to plastic will be classified as it will classified as this chemical recycling, which has a chance to be on a higher level of the waste hierarchy.
Thanks, Peter. There's a comment from Deandra that says, in Scandinavia too, we return plastic bottles and glass bottles and cans to the store, and it works quite well. And then there's a comment, a question from Peter that says, do you see any solutions for SIDS, small island development states, that do not have the scale of economy and waste generation to make many mechanical and chemical recycling possible?
Yeah, I fully agree to Peter, because we have the same situation on some small islands in Greece. It is very difficult to establish both separate collection and appropriate waste management or recycling infrastructure, because mostly those islands are populated during the summer times from tourists, and during winter times only a few inhabitants are living at the island. So it's a problem, and we are facing that also in Malta, in Cyprus, and on small Greek islands. This is something what is not very common in the broad discussion in Brussels, but I fully agree that this is something what we have to focus on. But I don't have a solution now for that.
Thanks, Peter. Understandable that there's it's a complicated situation to try and solve. And there's a comment saying, can you comment on extended producer responsibility?
Yes, this is a very important strategic instrument. We have to shift more responsibility to all producers in terms of environmental protection. It's not only related to waste management and recycling. If it comes to the automotive industry, for instance, they do not realize extended producer responsibility when it comes to the time when their car becomes a ELV after the use phase of 12 to 15, 17 years, and the car will end up on a shredder facility. And there's no understanding of some sectors and some industries that they should also overtake responsibility for the end of life phase of their products. And it's a very, very important instrument, and especially when it comes to what chemicals are used in the products, and those chemicals are later on causing huge problems in the disposal or recycling of that product. And this is heavily discussed also now on European level. We have this SCIP data bank, which is let's say an instrument to get more information from the producers and importers who put products on the European market, what materials or what chemicals are in their products, and they have to register all the single chemicals, which is a huge fight against this new SCIP database, and we will see how this will proceed. But in fact, extended producer responsibility means that the costs of the end of life phase of a product, that means its recycling or its disposal, has to be covered by the origin or producer. And this is very cost effective for the producer. That's why they are not willing to do so.
Thank you, Peter. There's a comment that says, thanks for the very informative presentation. A recent study showed that recycling will globally account for 20% of plastic leakage reductions by 2040. What else is the EU doing beyond recycling, since recycling can only get us so near to the goal?
The EU is now facing on raw material intensive products or products or streams which are relevant in terms of hazardous substances. So there are textiles in focus of the European Union to put better and detailed waste legislation on textiles, followed by waste electronical and electrical waste. And then we have building and demolition waste, which is a huge quantity. It's not so dangerous, not so hazardous, but it's a huge quantity. And I think there's missing another stream, but I don't have it in mind. I can answer that by email if somebody wants to have further information for that. Send me your email. By the way, my email address is on the last slide of my presentation. I saw a question concerning my email address.
Thanks for addressing that, Peter. Yeah, we can also supply that with the link to the webinar as well, and it should be available on the recording then. There's a question from Omar that says, is waste generated during COVID, such as masks in households, is that disposed in general waste?
Yes, because you know, we have mostly a landfill ban introduced in majority of European member states, and so municipal waste in Austria, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Belgium, in Netherlands, in Denmark, in all the Scandinavian countries is going for incineration. And so if you have COVID-19 contaminated municipal waste, there is no danger to let's say that the waste can pollute any other persons. Of course, there are people working on the waste management services and in the incineration plants, but normally you get not into contact with the waste where some face mask in it, and it might be contaminated with COVID-19. We have extended safety measures in hospitals. Of course, there's a lot of contaminated waste which has to be collected separately, and it's collected like infectious waste, which is normally also collected separate in hospitals and health institutions. So it's handled and it's managed and it's treated like infectious waste. We call it infectious waste because COVID was not present before that classification was done, and so all this COVID contaminated waste is handled together with the infectious waste, and then it goes to a specific incineration plant where the bins are not opened, they stay closed, etc.
Thanks, Peter. That sounds quite similar to sort of hospital waste, which makes a lot of sense. Then there's a final question from Hank that says, what are the chances of a global convention on plastic management? Can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, global convention, I fully support this idea, and there are some activities from different associations or foundations already implemented. But we have to work on, let's say, a global foundation and to make it more public and to even support those activities, because now we have some activities based in Europe, based in North America, based in Southeast Asia, and we have all to connect them together. And this is the most complicated part behind it. But yes, this is a must-have. I would say this is not nice to have a global convention. We must have a global convention on that. It's very urgent and very, very important. Yes, I fully agree with that.
Thanks, Peter. I agree, and I think part of the issue is that so many people host a lot of conferences and they'll deal with plastic in different ways. But I think you really kind of need a global sort of way to address the issue with a bit more weight behind it. I don't see any.
Tara, I cannot hear you. You are unmuted.
Questions at this time. But I'd just like to say, so I think we can end it here for today. But if anyone,
Tara, I cannot hear you.
hi, sorry. Can you hear me?
Now it's okay. Now I can hear you. Can you repeat your last sentence, please?
Sorry about that. I just wanted to say, if anyone has any questions going forward, you can either email Peter or you can email webinars@SSC Africa, and we can pass that on. But otherwise, I'd just like to say a special thank you, Peter, and Unico in his absence. But thank you so much for talking to us today. It was an incredibly informative webinar, and it's wonderful to have someone with your kind of authority on the topic to speak with us today. And thank you.
Thank you also, and it was a big pleasure for me, and thank you also for the invitation. And if anybody wants to get more answers on his question or her question, please
sharing with us, everyone, for attending, and also for bearing.
I cannot.
Sorry, there seems to be a delay on my end.
Yeah, there's something with the line.
There seems to be a problem. So, Peter, on behalf of Sustainable Seas Trust and the other partners here, thank you very much indeed. And to those to whom Tara was trying to communicate, you can contact Peter through us. You can get further information through us by contacting the Sustainable Seas Trust info sites. So please do so. Peter, that was really tremendous. We're looking forward to having you visit us at our conference in 2022. It was supposed to be this year. It's been postponed to 2022 April. So it's going to be wonderful having you there.
Yes,
so to everybody who attended, on behalf of Tara, who's disappeared, her thank you slide is up. For all of you, thanks very much indeed. Tara, thanks for putting it together, and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.